from ancient times. The floods, streams, lift up Yahawah. The streams lift up their sound. The streams lift up their waves. Yahawah, He exists, existence, reality, His elevation, His Atayar, mighty, His noble, servants, voices, and the great waters, and the mighty waves of the sea. The testimony, witness, are very aman, faithful, faithful, and the set apart house of Yahawah forever. And that's Psalms 93, 1 to 5. Crypto hidden Israelites in Mexico during the 16th century, 14th century, and 15th century. Mexico was originally inhabited by a number of Indian races who dominated the land until they were subjugated by the Spanish. Historians dated the beginning of the colonial period of Mexico as August 13, 1521, for it was on the day that the Spanish force commanded by Hernán Cortés, occupied Tecnotlan, after later called Mexico City, the capital of the Aztec Empire. Cortés accomplished this hard-won conquest after having made his way to the Aztec capital from the Cuban via Veracruz, using Mexico City as his base. Cortés rapidly ramified his military effort, founding the Viceroyalty of New Spain from 1535. This dominion embraced all the territories north of Panama to Taos and Charleston, extending as far as the Pacific Ocean. It also included Spanish West Indies, Venezuela, Philippine Islands, to between the year 1565 and to the years 1565 and 1584. So basically, yeah, the Spanish or the Iberians, the Israelites came over here, and also there were also from people from the Philippines that came over here as well, both men and women, you know. Newly discovered countries had mines of the precious metals and vast expanses of arable land that offer an excellent market for European goods and skills, and the Aboriginals were pressed into service as slave laborers. It was tribal warfare, see right now. It was no longer than the possibilities of quick enrichment applied not only to Cortés' conquistadores, conquerors who were rewarded by him with encomiendas, country, estate with Indian slaves, servants, but also about an influence of other enterprise adventures. From the beginning, this group included a number of what they call new Christians, meaning Israelites who converted to Christianity from who knows when. It could be from recently, from 1492, or it could be during the Roman times, the Visigoth times, you know. At terms used to designate those Jews that their descendants who had accepted baptism in order to remain in Spain at the time of the expulsion, following the decree of May 31, 1492. And those Israelites who were freshly converted in Portugal in the year 1497, a small minority of new Christians became observant and devout Catholics, as we are to this day, like our families. But a great number of them under remain underground Israelites for centuries to come, who kept our customs. Ostensibly, ostensibly, they were Catholics and they went to church and outwardly observed the Catholic ritual, but at the same time, they continued to practice Israelite rites and ceremonies in secret. These Israelites and their descendants were called Anusim, in Hebrew, the forcefully converted. Their scorners branded them as marranos, pigs, and they made us eat pork too. That's what our families eat pork to this day, right? They made us eat this stuff, and they call us marranos, you know. And the documents of the Inquisition in Mexico, they were called Hebreos Cristianos, Nuevos Judaizantes Hebreos, New Christians. Rather not, we shall refer them as Judaizers. They migrated to Mexico partly because of economic opportunities already mentioned, but mainly in order to live far away from the suspicious eyes of their Christian neighbors and acquaintances. So they might be able to follow and to practice secretly their customs, cultural values of their ancestors. The Spanish authorities who had justified the expulsion decree of May 1492 by their by the fear of the Israelites corrupting the Christians and their faith were also suspicious of new converts to Christianity and did not trust their sincerity. Thus, Elizabeth the Catholic gave strict orders to only all Christian, meaning Israelites that were Christians like for generations, who could prove that their were four grandparents had already been converted to Catholic faith por los cuarto castados, migrated to the newly discovered America's territories. After her death, King Ferdinand, however, allowed new Christian, nah, Ferdinand, because Yahawah was the king. Ferdinand, however, allowed new Christians to do it. Charles V canceled this permission in 1518. On September 5, 1522, a decree was published to allow new Israelites or Muslim converts, what do they call this, Moriscos, the people that were in Morocco, and then when they were converted to Islam. They're the same people as the Iberians, you know, what I'm talking about. So when Islam came in, they converted the people from Morocco to Islam, to the religion, and many of them went to the Iberian with their relatives, and we also mixed with each other more, you know, and we became Muslims, you know, or Christians. It depends on the areas that we were, but we're the same people, right? We're the Iberians, you know, what they call it, the Hispanics, Iberians, the Hebrews, the Shemitic Hebrews, Israelites, who converted to religion, basically, and their children to migrate to New Spain only by special permission of what they call the crown. Those who were already settled they were required to re-embark for Spain on the first available ship, you know, and there was a Vatican Inquisition in Mexico. All right, so now Let's go over here real quick. Let me get the scripture right here. Verse 20. The exiles of the army of the children of Yasharaahl within the Canaanites, Philistines, the sons of Mizraim, Hamites, and the exiles of Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, and Sepharad, Spain, should possess the cities of the south, the lands of Judean and Jerusalem. Why? What it says that? Because there were also what they call black conquistadors in Mexico. You can see right here, place of conquest and activity, Mexico, Zacatula, Baja California, Yucatan, Costa Rica, Honduras, Panama, Venezuela, Peru, Chile, Peru, you know. Let's go again. Let's go more. West African or Iberian kingdoms, more likely the later in the early decades after Spanish first crossed the Atlantic. They were servants or slaves. They were more typical and later were less likely to authorize their liberty in the Americas than armed auxiliaries. Even in the militarized environment of the early conquests of the years often blur the line between the armed and unarmed. The experience of black auxiliaries was markedly different from the mass slaves of these reasons and because they function as individuals, alone or in small groups, as personal dependency agents of their Spanish rulers. Although the condition of slavery was certainly never tolerable, nor there was evidence of any slaves in the Spanish world perceived as much under any circumstances. Some slaves in this category were granted considerable responsibility and relative liberty of movement. So there was bond people who were so-called blacks who were free, and there were what they call servants. And the third category of the focus of this article is that they're armed as military of African descent. These men were ranging from African-born slaves to Iberian-born freemen and mixed racial ancestry. You know, so basically, we also had children with the so-called what they call women, the women, and there we a lot of women came. So and that's what people call like we mixed racial ancestry Afro Latinos. You know, we did have children with so-called black women. You know, so they're still us. The enslavement acquired or both during these times and during ancient times as well. You know, you know, the enslavement acquired their liberty soon after they began fighting along the Spanish, if not before. Very few black conquistadores seem to have remained as slaves after their participation in the conquest. Many of them went to like what they call Veracruz. Also went through down South America and stuff. You could see, you could tell. Much so such such men tended to hold predictable posts during and after the conquest, and to become the early colonial life in certain ways. They were few in numbers, but their lives sufficiently conform to certain patterns for analytical generalizing to be made about them. Nor did this phenomenon of the black conquistadors end with the initial service of Spanish conquest. As argued later, the article is survived in various forms throughout the colonial period, a more an important part of what we call black experience in Spanish America. Whether the Spaniards set foot in the Americas as members of the conquest companies that were occupied by black conquistadores. Several individuals are examples of are presented on the table that we'll discuss later in the terms of collective biographical patterns, but it's worth offering first of the brief narrative summary of examples arranged approximately chronological and geographic sequence according to three major phases, chains of Spanish conquest in 16th century America. You know, so it talks about right here the first of Spanish expansion from the mid 1492s to late 1510s arrived in Santo Domingo in 1502 or 1503. Gardillo was among the earliest Africans to reach the Americas as Columbus was productive of Italian Portuguese communities that played such a crucial role in the slave-based colonization, servant-based colonization of the Eastern Atlantic in the late 15th century. Blacks, so-called black slaves or servants, may have been traveled with the Caribbean in the 1590s, although the best evidence for such practice is asserted in some accounts of Alonso Prieto, the pilot of the Niña on the 1492 voyage, was a mulatto. So he was mixed, so he could have been one of us. Certainly, of this fourth voyage in the 1502, Columbus traveled cabin bo- cabin with the black cabin boy named Diego, who may have been a servant rather than a than a than a slave. That same year, a black slave was sent to trade Spanish goods in Hispaniola, along with other ancients of Juan Cordoba and converso merchant who was an associated with Columbus. The earliest the earliest evidence of black conquistadores in the Spanish colonies also comes from 1502 and the year of new government Española. Nicolás Ovando brought with him from Spain a number of Iberian-born slaves, not only to work but to keep the indigenous population subdued. That's what they say. They seem to have done an opposite, however, for within a few months Ovando banned further introduction of blacks to the ground and then excited native rebellion. Nevertheless, enshrining the decade of King Ferdinand, repeatedly permitted the encouragement of taking across the Atlantic blacks, blacks servants, who continued to enter the colony in small but steady growing numbers, who participated in the Spanish expansion in the region. In 1508, Ponce de Leon took armed Africans to help the conquer Puerto Rico, while Diego de Venezuela similarly used so-called black auxiliaries in his conquest of Cuba in 1511 and 12. In 1512, Juan Garrido later claimed to have participated in both these expeditions. In 1515, Velasquez wrote that the ruler that many so-called black servants were taken in on the invasion of Cuba, but were left there as were none, but none were left there after this pacification due to lack of royal authority, because that will not convince the what they call the ruler. In other words, Velasquez probably had concerns over the loyalty of the servants and saw the profit participant in the conquest. Those the blacks and Americans were the carrier auxiliary, some of the most unarmed, partly or few, in the 1490s on the voyage exploration, and several dozen, perhaps 100. 1502 to 1510. You know, so here is a list of them. You know, was born in the West Africa. You know what I'm saying? So you can see right here, Juan Nunez Soldeño. So there's more. You can just read it. You know, there's more. You can just read it, everything what it says. But basically, we brought servants over here. But why did we brought the servants? Why do we have servants? That's the question, right? You know. Let's see. This is what the scriptures say. Right. Let's check right here quick. Let's go to Joel 3, chapter 3, verse 5 to 8. Yahweh says, "You have taken my silver and gold, carry into the temples my valuable, pleasant things. The children of Judah, the Judeans, and the children of Jerusalem, you have sold as merchandise to Havan, Japhet. You remove them far from their borders territories. Behold, I will raise them out where you have sold them, and I will return to your recompense and trim it to your own head. I will sell servants, merchants, your sons and your daughters, your descendants, in the hand of the children of Judah, the Judeans, and merchants, servants of the Sabaeans, a Hamitic mixed people with Semitic people, the descendants of Seba, a son of Cush. And your people shall be in distant lands, declares Yahweh." That's what it says, bro. So basically, we have servants during that time, what they call because you took us there, and Yahweh's, where you took us throughout the Mediterranean to Spain, you helped the other nations, to enslave us and stuff. That's what you guys did. So it came back, all right? Came back. That's what Yahweh says. See how the word of Yahweh is true, you know? Repent and return to Yahweh, all nations. Now, let's talk about the native conquistadores, the indigenous allies in America. But first, let's get this right here. Listen, Yasharaahl, to YAHAWAH Ahlahayam, for you have stumbled by your iniquity. And that's Hosea 14:1. So let's go on page 45 real quick. So this is the painting what they talk about, right? Now let's go right here first. The traditional conquistador-based view of the conquest is as entrenched as it once was. On the one hand, 7 myths of the Spanish conquest present these myths, meaning the misconceptions and well and stretched enormous pretensions as so deeply rooted as persist in some form or another to this day. On the other hand, the book was also made possible by increasing number of revisionist voices and presentations of the myth debunking evidence. A development of notably reflection in the present volume, indeed, aspect of the revisionist view of the conquest that has arguably become most widely known and accepted is the existence of the native allies. The most obvious example of this undisputed fact is that the Tlaxcala provided a large number of warriors to assist the Spanish in their siege and destruction of Tenochtitlan In fact, this is no longer a revisionist observation at all, as no historian today will argue the marginalization of Tezcaltecas, of Tezcalteca and the Quixlac paintings actually reflect these roles in the destruction of the Mexican Empire, of the Mexica Empire. However, what is less well known is full extended in nature of native support and influence during the Spanish decades, decades, of Spanish military activity in Mesoamerica, beginning in 1519. In this chapter, we'll, dis, we'll discuss the native roles in four categories, moving from better known towards more novel suggestions regarding the causes of conquest, patterns, and possibilities. These four categories are: first, numbers of native auxiliaries; second, the ubiquity of native allies beyond the best known examples of the Spanish Mexico War of 1582 to 21; the third, crucial role of the non-combatant auxiliaries such as guides, spies, interpreters, porters, cooks, and so on; the fourth, possibility that the Spanish conquest intimated inte- imitated pre-conquest patterns of imperial expansion in Mesoamerica, so that it became the model of some extent of the conquest that created the Mexica Empire. Our sources are a combination of external resources and primary archival, archival ones. Most petitions sent to Spain by the 16th centuries. Mesoamerica conquistadores. Now, let's read what it says right here. Watch. It's in Spanish, but let's go with the translation in English real quick. So you guys read in Spanish too. Right. And he saw that at the time there came to help in the conquest a great quantity of Indian friends, natives of Tlaxcala, and Mexicans, and natives of Cholula and Zapoteca and Mixteca and Yope, and from Cuauhtémoc, all friends of the Spaniards, who offered coming of this land, and witness saw in the service of power of our King and Majesty. Yahawah is the King, Yahawah is the Majesty. But I think they were talking to the over there writing a letter, were all the battles and encounters, and served very well with their persons and their arms, offering much exhaustion and hunger, and their privation and many wounds over the years, until the land was conquered and pacified and placed under the dominion of your Majesty. You know, so you can see that many natives were involved in the conquest. Now let's go over here real quick. Díaz del Castillo Xicoteclan, the principal ruler of Tlaxcala insisted that 10,000 soldiers should accompany the Spanish to Cholula. Later, during the siege of Tenochtitlan, the number of Spaniards had grown to 500 men, while at least 24,000 indigenous allies took part. These numbers could have been higher still. These are the reference to as many as 40,000 indigenous soldiers taking part in the campaign of Iztapala. Armies of Indians friends were less likely to number in the tens thousands after 1521 due to the death toll of the Spanish-Mexican War and the impact of the waves of pandemic disease beginning in 1520, but it was still common for Spanish embarking on campaigns throughout Mesoamerica to be accompanied by thousands of Nahua from central Mexico and other native warriors. As the next section brief discusses and subsequent chapter in this volume demonstrate in detail, this is what the true for decades through the founding of the Spanish colony in Yucatan in the early 1540s. And let's go read it in Spanish. Let's go in English. And these Indian conquistadores of New Spain, having conquered and won this land, stayed in large number and settled in old city of Almogan, which was near Guatemala, Antigua, where and their children and descendants now now and lived. And many Spanish captains went out from the city of Guatemala with many people to conquer and settle provinces of Cuscatlan, which the Spanish now call San Salvador, and the provinces of Honduras and the province of Verapaz, and that of Chiapa. And this witness saw that those captains when many Indians from among those Mexica Tlaxcalteca. So again, there's another I'm telling you. Now let's go to over here. Look, Figure 2.3. Cuauhtecholteca warriors fighting against other people in Mexico. Left and Guatemala. Right. The Cuauhtecholteca were full of warrior regalia and are shown in higher position than their opponents, significant victory in battle. From lienzo de Cuauhquecholan, and you see the depiction, natives versus natives, tribal warfare, you know, between the natives and the Spanish, because we're all brothers. Now, let's go over here real quick to scripture. Yawasap is a fruitful son, fruitful children by the springs, and whose branches go over the wall. So, Joseph is fruitful. Now, let's go. Where? Ooh, 48. So let's talk about women. you know. And look, people want to say that, oh, the rape and this and that, maybe that those things did happen, or I don't know, I wasn't there, but you know, but this is what how we multiplied, through marriage, and we had families together. That was just not rape and stuff like that. That's just propaganda and people just talking. They don't even know. And it seems that they had concern among the caciques to give us their daughters and nieces, most beautiful that they had. They were maidens in waiting, and they said that the elder Chicoteclan, Malinche Cortez, so that you may more clearly know that the good that we want, and we wish to placate, placate you in everything. We want to give you our daughters so that they may be your women and that you bear fruit, because we want to have you as our brothers, because you are so good. You are good and robust. I have a very beautiful daughter. She has not been married, and I want her for you. And likewise, Miss Glass Texin and all the other caciques said that they would bring their daughters so that we will receive them as women, and they they made many offers. So there was like arranged marriages, you know, throughout Mexico, and we mixed with each other, and we became many. Both right here real quick. Conclude about the conquistadors. So let's just bring the conclusion. The overwhelming presence and participation of indigenous people themselves is not an account of traders, of complaints, or the people feeling sorry for themselves. On the contrary, it is a contrary is an account of bravery and people believing in the process which they have been involved. But in the end, it is also an account of this disillusionment, of great suffering, and people who fought very hard, who gave their lives in order to receive what, according to the world, was rightfully theirs, only to find out that the rules no longer applied. You know. So yeah, the people participating and they were not given what was fair to their share, the natives. So, and both the Spanish too, they just fought with each other. And then what happened? They took Mexico away and everything when we were mixed with each other, took everything away. Why? Because you have to return to Yahawah. Well, you see right now. A major goal of this volume is to applicate the term Indian conquistadores, that the Tezcatlipoca are within doubt the most famous Mesoamerican allies of the Spanish. Part of this chapter in this volume make clear that the Tezcatlipoca did not act alone. From the central Mexico and 10,000s of other Nahuatl speakers from various Alteple among the Teztec Tezcatlipoca, Mexica, Xochimilca, Choluteca, Uexochica, Texcoca, Cuauquecholteca, and the defeated Tecnoca Mexica themselves supplied tactical guidance and troops and weapons to their Spanish partners. Elsewhere, we encountered allies with Cholta, Por, Por, Chontal, Populuca, Cachicle, Cachiquel, Quiche, Achi, and Uchol, among others. So yeah, basically, you know, undoubtedly, emphasizing the Tolteca has created an era of obsessionary around them, fueling a secondary narrative of conquest that highlights native collaboration in the most negative sense. The Spanish, you know, manipulation of Mesoamerican politics, the Spanish have the agency, and that Tezcatlipoca are seen as belligerent enigma. How could they and the extension of the native group assist the Spanish have been short-sighted to enable the very power that they want to subjugate them? You know, uh, prelude less looking things from this European perspective is only depend by the acknowledgement that the Texcalca were not so obsessional after all the fall of Tenochtitlan in 1521. Many thousands of Mesoamerican allies, not only with the Spanish but also with one another, carried multiple conquests throughout the viceroyalty of New Spain that extended into the 18th century. The sheer number of indigenous conquistadors extended to which a number of Spanish actors and the variety of their mutual allies throughout the region. You know what I'm saying? So basically, it's saying that what people are saying is not really true. That we have to evaluate the conquest, how there were many different native people, you know, and other nations as well that came. But basically, our people mixed with each other and became one, you know. So now let's go over here real quick. And this is Hosea 14 and 9. Wisdom, understanding, discernment, knowledge, the path, the way of Yahweh is right. Justice, what is right, is the path, the walk, the journey. But those that break away fall. Listen, Yasharaahl, YAHAWAH Ahlahayam, the Spirit of YAHAWAH is one. Love YAHAWAH Ahlahayam with your mind, with your soul, with your strength. YAHAWAH, He exists, existence, reality. YAHAWAH, our Father, the supreme power is YAHAWAH.